The bright spotlights shone on Oprah Winfrey as she stood center stage at the National Policy Forum, exuding her trademark confidence in an elegant purple pantsuit. The audience, a mix of policy experts, journalists, and political figures, waited eagerly for America's most beloved talk show host to deliver her much-publicized speech on American values in crisis. Behind the curtain, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett stood silently, her navy suit perfectly pressed, eyes focused on her phone. Her staff had just sent over a copy of Oprah's opening remarks released to select media outlets. What she read stopped her cold. Oprah was about to completely misrepresent her voting record and political stance. Moments earlier, the moderator had introduced Winfrey with glowing admiration. The voice of a generation, a self-made billionaire who understands the struggles of everyday Americans. The audience applauded enthusiastically as Oprah began her remarks, her voice commanding the massive hall. "Our politicians have failed us," she declared. "Leaders like Jasmine Crockett are promoting policies that divide rather than unite." Crockett's eyes narrowed as she watched the broadcast on a backstage monitor. Her press secretary leaned closer and whispered, "They never told us she'd single you out." Crockett exhaled slowly, a calm determination settling in. "It's fine," she said evenly. "I brought receipts. This was no ordinary public forum. It was about to become the moment when Jasmine Crockett, the rising star from Texas, would remind Oprah Winfrey that celebrity influence doesn't place anyone above accountability. What followed would leave the entire audience stunned and reshape both women's public images for years to come. Before we continue this remarkable confrontation, take a second to like this video and subscribe for more sharp, fact-based political showdowns you won't see on mainstream media. The massive convention hall buzzed with energy. Phones were raised, cameras flashing, every eye fixed on Oprah Winfrey. For decades, she had been America's emotional compass, the billionaire talk show icon, whose rise from poverty had inspired millions. But today, she wasn't here to give away cars or interview celebrities. She was here to speak about what she called the political division eroding America's soul. Winfrey moved across the stage with her trademark composure, her voice rich and persuasive. "I've spent my life listening to people from every background," she said, her hands gesturing naturally. "And what I'm hearing now deeply concerns me. Politicians like Representative Crockett have turned away from the center. They speak in extremes, demonize their opponents, and rarely admit when they're wrong." On the giant screens beside her, carefully edited clips from congressional hearings played, showing Crockett's fiery exchanges in a way that made her appear combative rather than passionate. The crowd, largely Oprah's loyal followers and moderate policymakers, nodded in agreement. "Just last month," Oprah continued, "Representative Crockett blocked a bipartisan bill meant to help working families simply because she said it didn't go far enough. This all-or-nothing mindset is why Washington stays broken." Backstage, Jasmine Crockett remained composed, her anger controlled but visible in her eyes. At 44, she had built a reputation as a sharp attorney and fearless civil rights advocate long before entering Congress. A Harvard law graduate, she had spent years in Texas courtrooms defending voting rights and fighting inequality. Politics for her wasn't ambition, it was duty. Her chief of staff handed her a tablet showing social media reactions. Oprah wisdom was already trending. "They've been setting this up for weeks," he muttered. "Our sources say she hasn't even read the bill she's criticizing you for." Crockett opened the actual bill text on her phone, scrolling calmly. "She's either misinformed or deliberately misleading," Crockett said, keeping her voice even. That bill included a poison pill, amendment that would have removed protections from the very communities it claimed to support. "We didn't reject help for families, and we opposed the hidden cuts to existing programs," Crockett said firmly as a production assistant approached looking uneasy. "Congresswoman, you'll be on in 3 minutes," the assistant reported. "Ms. Winfrey's team has asked that you keep your responses limited to the pre-approved questions." Crockett gave a polite smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course they did." She straightened her jacket and glanced at her reflection in a nearby mirror. This moment wasn't only about defending her record, it was about pushing back against the growing trend of celebrities simplifying complex political issues while holding massive influence but little accountability. The audience doesn't know what's coming, her press secretary murmured, concern evident in his voice. They'll learn, Crockett replied calmly, and so will Oprah. She slipped her phone into her pocket, where she'd saved screenshots of Winfrey's conflicting statements over the years. They're all about to see that sound bites and edited clips can't stand against facts and evidence. As the moderator announced her name, Jasmine Crockett drew in a steady breath. The stakes couldn't have been higher. This wasn't just about her reputation. It was about defending political integrity in an era dominated by celebrity narratives and media distortion. The applause was noticeably restrained as Congresswoman Crockett stepped onto the stage, walking with controlled composure. Oprah Winfrey greeted her with a camera-ready smile that felt carefully practiced. The contrast between the two was immediately apparent. Oprah, the billionaire media icon with a polished public image, and Crockett, the sharp attorney known for her precision and candor. Representative Crockett, thank you for joining us today, Oprah began smoothly, gesturing toward the empty chair opposite her. I think we can all agree that finding common ground is crucial in today's divided political climate. Crockett sat down, adjusting her microphone with quiet confidence, ready to respond on her own terms. Thank you. Ms. Winfrey, I agree that finding common ground is important, when it's built on facts, not misrepresentations. A quiet murmur spread through the audience. This wasn't the deferential tone most guests used with Oprah. Winfrey tilted her head, her expression one of practiced concern. That sounds like you're already taking offense before we've even begun. Is this kind of defensiveness what makes compromise so hard in Congress? The audience shifted in their seats as tension filled the room faster than anyone expected. Crockett, however, remained composed. I'm not being defensive, Ms. Winfrey, she replied evenly. I'm being direct, and I believe your audience deserves clarity about the claims you made before inviting me on stage. She turned slightly toward the crowd. Ms. Winfrey suggested that I blocked a bipartisan bill meant to help working families. What she didn't mention is that this so-called bipartisan bill included an amendment that would have cut childcare subsidies for more than 300,000 families to fund a tax break for corporations. Oprah's smile stiffened as she tried to regain control of the conversation. Well, politics is about compromise, isn't it? Sometimes we have to give a little to get things done. Compromise shouldn't mean sacrificing the most vulnerable, Crockett replied, her tone steady but firm. And I wonder if your audience knows that your own production company would have benefited from those same tax breaks. A collective gasp swept through the room. The moderator quickly tried to step in. Perhaps we should... No, Crockett said calmly, raising a hand. Transparency matters. Ms. Winfrey framed this as a conversation about American values, but didn't mention her financial interest in the policies she's supporting. Suddenly, the large screens behind them, originally programmed to show pre-approved footage, began displaying Crockett's own slides, financial records highlighting Oprah's investments in companies that stood to gain from the bill. Backstage, Crockett's digital team had overridden the forum's media feed. The technical staff scrambled to switch back, but the evidence was already visible to everyone. Winfrey's trademark composure wavered. This is highly inappropriate. We're here for a civil conversation about unity, not personal attacks. Civil doesn't mean unchallenged, Crockett responded, her voice clear and confident. If we're talking about unity, it has to start with honesty about who benefits from the policies being discussed. The moderator, visibly unsettled, tried again to guide the discussion back to its planned format. Let's shift to the broader topic of political division. I'd be glad to, Crockett said, nodding. She reached for her phone. In fact, I've gathered a few quotes from Ms. Winfrey over the years that illustrate this very problem. She held up her screen, displaying a series of Oprah's past statements, side by side, revealing contradictions in her comments about compromise and corporate accountability. Oprah's team began signaling frantically from offstage, making quick-cutting gestures with their hands. A producer hurried forward to whisper something into the moderator's ear. We'll need to take a brief break, the moderator suddenly announced. Are we breaking because I'm presenting facts? Crockett asked, raising an eyebrow. Her comment, caught by the microphones before they were shut off, sent another uneasy ripple through the audience. As the house lights brightened for an unplanned intermission, social media erupted. Hashtags like Dr. Crockett posed and Oprah exposed began trending within minutes. Clips of the exchange spread rapidly online, with viewers split between shock at seeing Oprah directly confronted and admiration for Crockett's composure and preparation. Backstage, Oprah's team gathered in urgent discussion. "This is not what we agreed to," her chief publicist said sharply to the event organizer. She was supposed to stay within the approved topics. Meanwhile, Crockett remained calm in her green room, sipping water and reviewing her notes. "They'll probably try to cut my mic when we're back," she told her staff. "Make sure our backup plan is ready." When the intermission ended, the energy in the hall had completely shifted. The audience that had come expecting Oprah's usual tone of inspiration now sat forward, anticipating a genuine political face-off. And Jasmine Crockett was only just beginning. As cameras prepared to roll again, Oprah's team circulated a revised format to everyone involved. The new instructions were clear. The moderator would ask the questions. Each participant would have 2 minutes to respond, and no interruptions would be allowed. It was pure damage control. But when the broadcast resumed, Crockett introduced something unexpected: a stack of folders containing printed copies of her evidence. She began handing them out to journalists in the front row. "What are you doing?" Oprah asked quietly, her microphone still on, even though the show wasn't supposed to be live yet. Crockett met her gaze. "Ensuring the truth doesn't get edited out," she replied. The red lights on the cameras blinked on, signaling they were live again. The debate had entered its next, more intense phase. The production crew scrambled to regain control as the moderator, visibly tense, tried to reset the discussion with a neutral question about infrastructure investments. But the moment had already shifted. The tone was confrontational now, and millions of viewers tuning in for Oprah's usual insight were witnessing something completely new: America's most influential talk show host being openly challenged on live television. "Before we continue," Crockett said evenly, "I think we should address the main issue here. Ms. Winfrey made several claims about my voting record that are simply untrue, and I believe your audience deserves accurate information." Oprah's well-known warm smile had noticeably cooled. "I think we've moved past that stage in our discussion, Congresswoman," she said evenly. "Let's focus on solutions rather than accusations." "Accountability isn't an accusation," Crockett replied calmly. "And solutions built on misinformation won't serve anyone." She turned slightly toward the audience. "I have great respect for Ms. Winfrey's accomplishments. Her journey from poverty to becoming one of the most influential women in the world is truly inspiring. But influence carries responsibility, especially when shaping conversations about policies that impact millions of Americans." A quiet wave of agreement moved through parts of the audience. Oprah sensed the shift and tried to steer the discussion back to familiar ground with her signature emotional tone. "What the American people want," Winfrey began, her voice adopting the motivational rhythm that had defined her career, "is for their leaders to set aside minor disagreements and work together. I've interviewed presidents and ordinary citizens alike, and what I've learned is that our shared humanity—" "With all due respect," Crockett interrupted smoothly, "what the American people actually want is the truth." She reached into her folder and held up a document. "This is the exact text of the bill you criticize me for opposing. Section 43 explicitly removed healthcare protections for vulnerable communities, while Section 119 introduced new tax breaks for large media corporations, including your own." The screen behind them lit up, displaying the highlighted portions of the legislation. Crockett continued, "Your company, Harpo Productions, stood to gain an estimated $247 million from this clause. Yet, you portrayed my opposition as simply blocking assistance for working families." The audience's reaction was immediate, gasps followed by the low hum of whispered conversations. Oprah's expression shifted between surprise and irritation before settling into a controlled smile. "I think you're overlooking the broader picture, Congresswoman," Winfrey replied, trying to regain control of the discussion. "Policy debates require nuance, not—" "I completely agree about the need for nuance," Crockett interjected, her tone steady yet resolute. "Which is why I was surprised that your opening remarks were so generalized." She took out her phone. "May I replay what you said earlier for clarity?" Before anyone could respond, Crockett tapped play, and Oprah's recorded voice echoed through the auditorium. "Politicians like Representative Crockett have abandoned the middle ground. They speak in absolutes, demonize their opponents, and refuse to admit when they're wrong." Crockett looked directly at Winfrey. "That doesn't sound nuanced to me, Ms. Winfrey. It sounds like the very divisive rhetoric you say you're against." The moderator began to step in, but Crockett continued, her delivery controlled and precise. "What concerns me most is this. When someone with your platform, which reaches millions, makes such claims without full context or factual accuracy, it doesn't just affect me personally. It misinforms the public about how their government actually works." The audience, once fully supportive of Oprah, had fallen noticeably silent, their focus fixed on the unexpected turn the discussion had taken. Sensing the shift in the room, Winfrey tried to steer the conversation toward her strength, emotional connection. "I understand your frustration, Congresswoman. Perhaps we started off on the wrong note. What I really want is to hear your perspective. Tell us, in your own words, why you believe your approach serves America best." It was a practiced effort to reset the tone, the kind of moment Oprah had often used to turn tense interviews into moments of empathy and understanding, but Jasmine Crockett wasn't interested in an Oprah moment. "I appreciate that. Ms. Winfrey," she began evenly, "but this isn't about my emotions or yours. It's about accuracy." Turning toward the audience, Crockett continued, "When public figures with immense influence make political statements, they also carry the responsibility to be well informed. The bill we're discussing would have helped some working families. That's true, but at the cost of others. It sought to fund new initiatives by cutting programs that serve our most vulnerable communities." She paused briefly, letting her words register before adding the key revelation. "And here's what your audience may not know. Just 3 weeks before taking your public stance, your investment team acquired significant shares in companies that stood to profit directly from those policy changes." Crockett lifted a set of financial disclosure documents, key sections highlighted for emphasis. "These are the same companies that helped sponsor this very forum," she stated. The room stirred instantly. Journalists in the front row began snapping photos of the evidence Crockett had shared earlier. Oprah's team rushed from backstage, gesturing urgently to the production crew. "This is inappropriate and potentially defamatory," Winfrey interjected, a flash of genuine frustration breaking through her usual composure. "You're making serious allegations based on loose associations." "These are public records, Ms. Winfrey," Crockett replied evenly. "SEC filings, congressional documentation, and your own public statements. Everything I've presented is verifiable." The moderator, now visibly anxious, attempted to pause the session for another break, but Crockett continued. "The American people deserve representatives who make decisions based on real policy outcomes, not popularity," she said. "And they deserve public figures who verify their claims before influencing millions of viewers." She turned directly toward the camera. "Dialogue matters, accountability matters, but above all, facts matter." Desperate to contain the situation, the production director cut to an unplanned commercial break, but it was too late. The live broadcast had already captured everything. Within minutes, clips flooded social media under trending hashtags like Toss Crockett Challenge and Toss Oprah Accountable. In less than 15 minutes, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett had accomplished what few had dared. She had confronted Oprah Winfrey on her own stage, armed with undeniable evidence. The balance of power had shifted entirely. As the unscheduled break stretched on, tension filled the backstage area. Oprah's advisors surrounded her, whispering rapid-fire strategies. Just a few feet away, Crockett stood calmly, reviewing her notes as though preparing for another day in Congress. Moments later, a voice from production announced, 2 minutes to return. When the lights rose again, the audience waited in anticipation, eager to see how America's most celebrated interviewer would recover from being challenged in her own arena. When the cameras resumed, Oprah Winfrey had regained her composure. Her decades of media experience hadn't failed her. Oprah Winfrey understood when it was time to step back strategically. "Before we continue," Winfrey began, her tone calm and deliberate, "I want to acknowledge something important. Congresswoman Crockett has raised some valid concerns regarding the accuracy of certain statements I made earlier." She turned toward Crockett with a measured nod. "While we may interpret the effects of legislation differently, I should have been more specific about the details of the bill in question." It wasn't quite an apology, but even that partial concession sent ripples through the audience. Oprah Winfrey almost never admitted fault. Crockett accepted the gesture graciously. "Thank you for that clarification, Ms. Winfrey. I believe we both share the same goal, to do what's best for the American people, even if our approaches differ." The final 40 minutes of the forum took on a noticeably different tone, more thoughtful, more policy-focused, and far more balanced in speaking time. Yet, despite the restored civility, the damage to Winfrey's long-standing image of authority had already been done. As the event wrapped and the cameras powered down, the true story was just beginning. Within hours, Dr. Crockett checkmate became the #1 trending topic nationwide. Video clips of the exchange spread rapidly across social media, with the key moment, Crockett revealing financial documents and Oprah's visible reaction dominating the conversation. Conservative outlets seized on the story with headlines like, "Congresswoman brings receipts," "Leaves Oprah speechless," and "Crockett exposes celebrity politics." Yet unexpectedly, several progressive publications also covered the confrontation favorably, framing it as a necessary wake-up call about the responsibility that comes with wielding media influence. Many described it as a masterclass in preparation for public figures who engage in policy debates. Political analysts across the spectrum quickly weighed in on the event's broader implications. That evening, CNN hosted a panel discussion dissecting every angle of the now viral exchange. "What we witnessed today wasn't just a politician defending her record," noted veteran political correspondent Jessica Winters. "It was a direct challenge to the way celebrities influence policy debates in America." Congresswoman Crockett arrived prepared, with documents, verified facts, and clear evidence, essentially turning what was meant to be an emotional discussion into a detailed legislative exchange. Her fellow panelist, Marcus Johnson, agreed. "Winfrey has interviewed presidents, world leaders, and industry giants, yet I've never seen her so unprepared for a guest. The real question now is how this will affect her credibility and political influence moving forward." By the evening, the story had moved beyond politics and into mainstream entertainment coverage. ABC News aired a segment titled, "Oprah's Toughest Interview Yet." Meanwhile, Entertainment Tonight featured body language experts breaking down the interaction frame by frame. Inside Harpo Productions, sources described a tense atmosphere as Oprah and her team held an urgent crisis meeting. One insider told Page 6, "She's taking this very personally. In nearly 4 decades of broadcasting, she's never been caught off guard like this. There are now serious questions about who failed to properly research the Congresswoman and prepare adequate responses." Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett's profile was skyrocketing. Her office reported a surge of non-stop calls from major networks requesting interviews. Her social media following jumped by more than 500,000 in a single day. Political organizations nationwide began reaching out to her campaign. More importantly, policy experts had begun seriously engaging with the legislation that initially sparked the exchange. The Washington Post published an in-depth analysis of the bill, largely validating Crockett's description of its clauses and the potential conflicts of interest she had exposed. 3 days after the forum, Oprah Winfrey released a carefully worded statement on her social media platforms. "Throughout my career, I have always valued truth, growth, and learning. My recent exchange with Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett has given me much to reflect on," Oprah Winfrey wrote. "While my intentions were sincere, I now realize that I didn't fully grasp the complexity of the legislation we discussed, nor did I clearly disclose certain relevant connections. I've always believed that when we know better, we do better, and this is my moment to do better." The statement drew a wide range of reactions. Some commended Winfrey's honesty and willingness to take responsibility, while others viewed it as insufficient or overdue. Yet the most impactful response came from an unexpected place. A week later, 23 prominent celebrities and influencers signed an open letter promising to follow new ethical standards in political commentary. The Responsibility and Influence Pledge required signatories to disclose financial or personal conflicts of interest, consult with policy experts before making public statements, and clearly distinguish between personal opinion and factual claims. The lead signature was none other than Oprah Winfrey herself. In her introduction, she wrote, "Sometimes our greatest growth comes from our most difficult moments. My conversation with Congresswoman Crockett revealed gaps in my approach to policy discussions. Instead of moving past it, I've chosen to learn and help set new standards for how influential voices engage with politics." For Jasmine Crockett, the aftermath brought both new opportunities and greater scrutiny. Her profile had risen dramatically, but so had the public's attention to every word she said. Conservative groups that had applauded her challenge to Oprah began approaching her as a potential ally, while some progressive organizations expressed concern over her willingness to publicly confront one of their most influential figures. Still, Crockett handled the moment with the same composure she displayed on stage. Appearing on MSNBC's Morning Joe, she clarified, "This was never about conservative versus progressive, or me versus Ms. Winfrey. It's about one core principle, that in policy discussions, accuracy must come before influence. I deeply respect Oprah and all that she's accomplished. My concern was the misrepresentation of legislation that affects real people." 2 weeks after their exchange, subtle but meaningful changes appeared across the political and media landscape. News outlets began including clearer policy explanations in their reports. Celebrities became noticeably more cautious when discussing politics, often clarifying that their remarks reflected personal opinions rather than expert insight, this says. Most tangible outcome came when the controversial bill that had sparked the confrontation was reintroduced in Congress with key revisions. The new version maintained aid for working families but removed the cuts to essential programs. Most notably, the corporate tax benefits Crockett had called out were completely eliminated. The bill's sponsor publicly credited the Winfrey-Crockett exchange for drawing attention to its flaws, stating, "Sometimes it takes a public spotlight to expose issues that might otherwise stay buried." This conversation made the bill stronger and fairer. 6 months later, Jasmine Crockett delivered the keynote address at the Harvard Kennedy School's Conference on Media, Celebrity, and Political Discourse. Her speech, titled "Accountability in the Age of Influence," filled the hall to capacity. "The democratization of media has given more people a voice than ever before," she said, "but amplification without verification can weaken the democratic ideals it's meant to protect. Whether you're a first-time congresswoman or a billionaire media icon, the rules should be the same. Claims need evidence, and influence demands responsibility." In the front row, Oprah Winfrey listened intently. The two were later photographed in deep conversation at the reception, both smiling, though neither revealed what was said. Exactly 1 year after their televised confrontation, they jointly announced a new initiative, a free online course on media literacy and policy analysis, designed to help citizens better understand how entertainment, news, and legislation intersect. The first module was titled, "Bringing Receipts: How to Verify Claims from Any Source." For the public, the Oprah Crockett exchange had become part of American culture. The phrase, "Do you have the Crockett receipts for that?" entered popular vocabulary as a shorthand for demanding proof in any argument. High school debate teams began studying the exchange as a lesson in preparation and precision. Most importantly, a new norm had taken hold, that no voice, no matter how powerful or admired, was above fact-checking, and no claim, no matter how passionately delivered, was exempt from verification. What started as a tense onstage clash evolved into something far more meaningful, a recalibration of how influence, truth, and accountability coexist in public discourse. The takeaway was simple. In an era of instant communication and celebrity activism, facts still matter, preparation still matters, and as Jasmine Crockett proved that day, the courage to speak truth to power with evidence in hand matters most of all. That's the real story behind the confrontation that changed the rules of celebrity political engagement. If you found this breakdown insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into the defining political moments of our time. And tell us in the comments, which celebrity do you think needs a fact check next?